The matte gray Jeep Wrangler sat idle on the gravel shoulder of the Charleston South freeway, engine humming low like a predator in wait. The sun was brutal, hanging low, sharp, unapologetic. It baked the asphalt until the air shimmered, but inside the vehicle, the climate was cold, calculated. General Monica R. Gaines didn't move. She sat behind the wheel, posture straight as a rifle barrel. Her fingertips danced lightly across the touch screen of her military-grade GPS unit. Not frantic, not fumbling. Just rerouting. The detour wasn't her fault. Construction had rerouted the perimeter trail near Fort Ridge, and after 29 years of service, Monica knew better than to rely on instinct when the terrain shifted. She'd commanded troops across 3 continents, but even the most seasoned commanders could get waylaid when the land beneath them refused to stay still. The Jeep's interior was clean and disciplined, no clutter, no fluff. A canteen in the side pocket. A service badge was tucked near the console. 2 silver stars glinting faintly from her shoulder tabs. Stars earned, not gifted. Her uniform wasn't full dress. It was the kind of utilitarian gear she wore when she moved between operational briefings and classified site visits. To the casual observer, it might have looked nondescript. But nothing about General Monica R. Gaines was ever casual. Her breathing was even. Measured, her face composed. That calm, weathered look of someone who had been under mortar fire and congressional scrutiny, and learned the art of surviving both. Then came the light, a sudden eruption of red and blue in the rear view, flashing. Demanding, the hum of passing traffic dulled to a low drone in her ears. She didn't curse. She didn't flinch. Instead, she sighed, not from fear, not even from annoyance. No, it was that kind of sigh. The one every black person in America learns to recognize by adulthood. The sigh that says, "Here we go again." The sign was passed down from grandfather to father to daughter. The kind that carries fatigue from generations of unjust stops, misread intentions, and too many guns drawn before questions asked. Monica tapped the GPS once more, then slowly reached for the window switch. Glass lowered. Hands already up, 10 and 2, nails neatly trimmed, fingers steady. From behind the flood of flashing lights stepped a man in khaki tan, right hand on the butt of his pistol, left hand resting like it was daring her to move. Officer Jacob Finnerty, 38, white. He walked like he owned the pavement. Like the badge on his chest was permission to control the story before it even started. She had 3 stars on her shoulder. He hadn't seen them yet. But he was about to make the kind of mistake you don't walk away from, and the whole damn country was about to watch. "Roll your window all the way down, ma'am." The last word dropped like lead. General Monica R. Gaines didn't flinch. The electric hum of the window had barely finished when the officer's silhouette filled her periphery, broad-shouldered, tense, one hand planted firmly on his belt, the other grazing the grip of his holstered weapon with a familiarity that didn't suggest caution, but instinct. She turned her head slowly, carefully, like a woman who had studied what could happen to people who moved too fast. Her expression was still, unreadable. "Yes, officer?" He squinted at her through mirrored sunglasses, the late-day sun bouncing off his patrol car behind him. The red and blue lights stuttered across her dashboard, dancing across her uniform. Officer Jacob Finnerty, white. 38. Southern drawl clipped sharp from years of letting power ferment into suspicion. "I need your license and registration," he said, already irritated, as if she had personally delayed his day. "Reaching now," she said evenly. Her voice was calm, not submissive, not challenging, just controlled. A tone born not in classrooms, but war zones. She moved slowly, methodically, right hand to the glove compartment, left hand still on the wheel. Every motion is deliberate. Every action was designed not to escalate, even as he hovered like a man already escalated. She handed him the documents: a government-issued ID, a military registration card, and a current driver's license. Everything pristine. Everything exactly where it needed to be. He glanced at the cards briefly, then looked back at her face, not the stars on her collar, not the base credentials clipped to her visor. Just her face. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Fort Ridge perimeter." Adjusting my GPS for the updated route. "You military?" "Yes." "Active duty?" "Yes." A pause. His eyebrows lifted. "Huh," he snorted. "You don't look it." He scanned her again, eyes flicking across the vehicle like he was searching for something, an inconsistency, a lie, anything to fit the story in his head. "What are you, logistics? Mechanic?" "I'm a general," she said, her tone still steady. His lips twitched, not with laughter, but disbelief. "Yeah, and I'm the Secretary of Defense." He tossed her ID back into the open window like it was an expired coupon. "Step out of the vehicle." Monica's eyes narrowed, just slightly. "Am I under arrest?" "I said out of the vehicle," he snapped. "Now." Her jaw locked. She had faced men with rocket launchers who shook less than this officer trying to puff his chest. Still, she moved. Slowly. Gracefully, like someone who refused to let someone else dictate the rhythm of her body. She opened the door, stepped out, and stood on the hot asphalt, boots square, spine straight, shoulders relaxed but ready. Her 3 silver stars glinted in the sunlight. If he saw them, he said nothing. "Turn around." "Hands where I can see them." "I've complied with every instruction," she said. "There's no probable cause for detainment." He stepped closer. She smelled coffee and control issues. His hand never left his belt. "Are you carrying any weapons?" "No, officer, I'm on duty." "Weapons are secured on base." He tilted his head. "So you're military when it suits you, huh?" She didn't answer. He didn't want a conversation. He wanted a reaction. "You're one of those affirmative action stars?" he muttered. "All title, no discipline?" She said nothing. Not because she didn't have words, but because she knew how quickly even the right words could be turned into threats in someone else's report. Across the road, a gray sedan slowed. A man inside lifted his phone and began recording. Another car honked in protest. "Why's she out of the car?" someone yelled. "She didn't do anything." The bystander's voice echoed, but Finnerty didn't blink. Monica's heartbeat was steady. She was trained for this exact moment when justice didn't matter, and presence was the only shield. "I'm going to make a phone call now," she said. "I have the right." "You'll make that call from the back seat of my cruiser," he interrupted. "Turn around." "Hands behind your back." Before she could finish her sentence, he grabbed her left wrist and twisted it back. Cold steel snapped around bone. The second cuff came faster. Her knees bent slightly as he shoved her toward the hood of her own Jeep. The metal was hot from the sun, burning against her forearms. She didn't cry out. She didn't resist. Because she knew exactly what was happening. And more importantly, she knew what was coming next. Across the street, the man in the gray sedan was now standing outside his vehicle, phone camera trained directly on the scene. "Why are you arresting her?" he shouted. Monica didn't look up. But she knew that voice didn't belong to a stranger. That was Captain Luis Santiago, Army Intelligence. She remembered his posture. His voice. She didn't need to see his face to recognize a soldier watching a commanding officer being treated like a criminal. "You're making a mistake, officer," she said, her voice cutting through the heat like glass. "A serious one," he snorted, adjusting her handcuffs. "Yeah? And what, your boss is going to come lecture me? No, she said, turning her head just enough so he could hear. The Pentagon is. But she didn't yell, didn't posture. She let the silence hang like storm clouds. Let him have his illusion. Let the cameras roll. Let the nation see. Because this wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was the moment everything changed. The cuffs were tight. Not out of necessity, but out of design. General Monica R. Gaines stood pressed against the hood of her own Jeep, her military-issued, base-registered Jeep Wrangler. Hands locked behind her back, wrists starting to throb from the unyielding pressure of steel on skin. The sun was relentless, beating down on the back of her neck. The hood radiated heat, searing through the sleeves of her uniform. But she didn't flinch. Didn't speak, didn't resist. She had learned long ago, restraint isn't weakness, it's strategy. Behind her, Officer Jacob Finnerty loomed, one hand still gripping the cuffs, the other hovering near his sidearm like it was a nervous tick. The weight of his authority wasn't measured by the law, it was measured by who he thought deserved protection. Monica wasn't one of them. Not to him. You got a smart mouth for a civilian, he muttered, breath hot and stale. Or are you not a civilian? Maybe you are in the military, but what are you? A mechanic? Desk jockey? She didn't answer. Maybe supply chain? Admin? They hand out stars for spreadsheets now? Still, nothing. Because she knew the truth. The silence would outlast him. Across the road, the world was starting to turn. A few cars had slowed when they saw the flashing lights. But once they saw her, a black woman in fatigues being bent over the hood of her vehicle by a white officer, phones came out fast. Windshields lowered. Drivers started pulling over onto the shoulder. A teenage girl in a red hoodie held her phone high, live streaming to an audience that would soon stretch from Charleston to Washington. Two men in business attire whispered to each other before one hit record. A mother leaned out of the passenger seat of an SUV and shouted, "Why is she cuffed? She didn't do anything." But Officer Finnerty wasn't listening. He wasn't looking. He was too busy patting down a general like she was carrying drugs instead of a distinguished service medal. "You military types think that means something out here," he said, voice low and smug. "That rank makes you untouchable." Newsflash, this is my jurisdiction. Monica clenched her jaw, her cheek still pressed lightly to the hot metal. Her uniform stuck to her skin. Her wrists screamed. But she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. "Officer," she said, voice clear but unraised, "I am requesting to make a phone call. I am entitled to do so under Federal Code 10 U.S.C. Part R 12301D for active duty military personnel under detainment." He laughed like she'd just claimed to be the Queen of England. "You're entitled to shut your mouth," he said. "You think reciting laws is gonna save you? Out here?" She turned her head slightly, just enough to catch his eye, her voice cooled to surgical sharpness. "You're making a mistake." "Oh, I'm sure I am," he smirked. "You gonna call your CO? Get me written up? Maybe send a sternly worded memo?" Monica's eyes didn't blink. Her tone didn't waver. "No, I was going to call Fort Ridge Base Operations, give them my ID number and activate the Echo Green Protocol." Finnerty's face twitched. He didn't recognize the term, but he recognized authority when it sounded like it didn't need his permission. "I told you," he snapped, "no phone calls." And with that, he stepped away from her, turning his back toward the growing crowd now fully lining the roadside. A man was already standing in the median, phone pointed directly at Finnerty, voice loud and incredulous. "She's military." "You can see the stripes on her collar. What the hell are you doing?" But Finnerty ignored him. His authority, in his mind, was bulletproof. And then the silence shifted. Not from Monica, not from Finnerty, But from across the street, a voice called out, not frantic, not angry, just official. "Sir, Captain Luis Santiago, U.S. Army. That woman is General Monica R. Gaines. She outranks everyone in this county." Finnerty turned slowly, face tight. "You got ID to prove that?" Santiago raised a leather badge wallet with practiced ease, his phone still filming. "It's all on camera." "And so is what you're doing." She's not resisting. She's requesting lawful communication under military protocol. More phones came up. A few people in the crowd murmured her name. Monica Gaines. "General." Recognition rippled like a wave breaking. She didn't look up. She didn't have to, because even with her face pressed against a sunburnt hood, Monica R. Gaines was taking command. "Sir," Santiago called out again, stepping one pace forward, "I am formally requesting that this detainment be suspended pending identification verification. You are risking federal violation of the Posse Comitatus Act and unlawful detainment of a U.S. Armed Forces officer under Title 10. Now Finnerty looked around, and for the first time, he saw the cameras. The girl in the hoodie, the SUV mom, the businessman, the soldier, the live stream, the eyes. He didn't move, but the power had. Monica, still handcuffed, turned her head toward the road and calmly said, "Someone call Fort Ridge Base Operations. Tell them General Monica R. Gaines is being detained on the Charleston South Freeway. Southbound. Marker 212. The name hit like a grenade. The girl in the hoodie gasped. The mother covered her mouth. Santiago straightened, eyes wide. Did she say General Gaines? Oh my God, that's her. Finnerty's face lost color. He looked down at the stars on her collar, finally, and what had once been arrogance shifted into something else. Fear. But Monica, she just breathed, not in panic. Not in pain, but like someone who had weathered bigger storms than a badge with no boundaries. The air changed first. Not the temperature, not the wind, but the pressure. It shifted, subtle but unmistakable. The way air changes before a thunderclap, before a detonation, before a command is issued and everything obeys. Still handcuffed, still facing the highway with sweat pooling beneath her collar, Lieutenant General Monica R. Gaines lifted her voice, not in anger, not in desperation, but with the absolute authority of someone who had sent entire battalions into battle and watched them return alive. I am Lieutenant General Monica Gaines, she said. Clear, calm, commanding. Can anyone call Fort Ridge Base and request immediate transfer to the Combat Coordination Command? A beat of silence followed, then motion. The teenage girl in the red hoodie dropped her phone from her face. Wait, what? General? Someone repeated it, then someone else. Did she say Lieutenant General? That's Gaines? Monica Gaines? The crowd on the shoulder, once a collection of curious bystanders, had become something else. Witnesses, standing on the edge of history without realizing it until now. Across the road, Captain Luis Santiago stood taller. He knew that name. Everyone in uniform knew that name. 3 tours. NATO Command. The Distinguished Service Medal. The kind of officer who changed not just battles, but policy. He lowered his phone and stepped onto the road, badge out, voice steady. Sir, he called out, this detention must end now. I am Captain Luis Santiago, United States Army. That woman outranks every person in this county, myself included. Finnerty didn't respond. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. His knuckles were pale, still gripping her arm as if the illusion of control could outlast the truth pressing in from all sides. She said she was active duty, he stammered finally. could have been lying? I didn't. Your ignorance is not an excuse, Santiago cut in, louder now. You have detained a 3-star general. You've refused identification, denied communication, and ignored multiple federal statutes. Finnerty turned to Monica like he was seeing her for the first time. She didn't look at him. She wasn't giving him that, because the sound was coming. The chop, low at first, then heavier. Rhythmic, dull thudding that shook the chest before the ears caught it. Heads turned. Over the tree line behind the traffic, a silhouette emerged. A military helicopter, gray and massive, moving low with clinical precision. Not a news chopper, not life flight. Not local. It wasn't here for tragedy. It was here because a chain of command had been activated. Finnerty stepped back from Monica instinctively, like the sky itself had just condemned him. Monica still hadn't moved, still hadn't blinked. Her wrists throbbed against steel, but her presence held like armor. Then came the SUV, black. Clean, unmarked, except for a small government plate on the bumper. It pulled in behind the patrol car like it belonged to no one, but outranked everyone. The rear passenger door opened before the vehicle fully stopped, and out stepped Colonel Evelyn Brooks. Her navy pantsuit was razor sharp. Silver hair coiled into a flawless bun. Her walk was measured, unflinching. Her gaze, surgical. She wasn't just there to observe. She was the storm after the warning. Finnerty squared his shoulders. "Who are you?" Brooks didn't answer him. She didn't even stop. She walked past him as if he were scenery. Her heels clicked against the pavement like the ticking of a clock about to run out. When she reached Monica, she didn't hesitate. "You all right, General?" Monica nodded once. "Yes, waiting on someone with common sense to show up." Brooks gave a tight smile. "Then let's fix this." From her pocket, she produced a small key and, without fanfare, unlocked the cuffs. The metal fell away in 2 short clinks. Monica exhaled, still measured, still in control, but the air around her shifted. Captain Santiago crossed the road quickly, now joined by 2 other uniformed officers who had arrived unnoticed. He saluted. Monica returned it with a nod. No theatrics. Just protocol. Brooks turned to Finnerty. "You detained a decorated general without verifying identification. You refused her a phone call. You escalated without cause. Do you have any idea what that means?" He opened his mouth. "Stop talking," Brooks said flatly. "Every word you say is making it worse." Now, finally, Finnerty saw what the rest of them had seen minutes earlier. Cameras. Phones. Dash cams. A drone is quietly circling overhead. He backed up a step, jaw tight, chest heaving. There was no siren he could blow that would silence what was coming next. Monica rolled her shoulders and stepped away from the Jeep, adjusting her uniform and brushing a bit of dust from her sleeve. Her wrists were red, tender. But her spine? Unbroken. She turned, not to Finnerty, but to the crowd. To the people still recording, still stunned. "This is what happens," she said, calm but razor sharp, "when the wrong person is given the right kind of power. They forget that authority is earned, not assumed." The road was quiet except for the soft wind and the distant hum of rotor blades. And just like that, the shift was complete. She had been detained. Now she was in command again. And the world was watching. The cuffs clattered against the pavement, metal symbols of a mistake that would soon echo far beyond this stretch of South Carolina highway. Colonel Evelyn Brooks didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence carried the weight of command, honed in briefing rooms and battle zones alike. She turned slowly to Officer Jacob Finnerty, who now stood awkwardly beside his cruiser, sweat slicking the collar of his uniform. "Let me get this straight," she said, her tone as sharp as a blade wrapped in protocol. "You handcuffed a 3-star general without verifying her identity?" Finnerty stammered. "She said she was active duty, but anyone can say that." "She presented ID," Brooks interrupted. "Federal military documentation, her name, her rank. And instead of verifying it, you escalated?" He shifted, looking around now like a drowning man searching for something solid. But nothing would save him here. Not the badge. Not the belt. Not the silence he'd once relied on, because silence had turned on him. Everywhere, cameras. A drone hovered quietly above the treetops, blinking red in the afternoon sun. Dash cams mounted on stopped vehicles captured every angle. Pedestrians were still filming, phones out, lenses locked. His mistake had become national evidence. "I thought maybe it was fake," Finnerty mumbled, eyes darting to Monica. "I've had people lie about being military before, claim to be someone they're not." Brooks didn't blink. "And did she resist?" "No." "Did she threaten you?" "No." "Did she raise her voice, insult you, refuse to comply?" "No." Brooks folded her arms across her chest. Her silence hit harder than words. From a few steps behind, General Monica R. Gaines spoke, not to Finnerty, but to the crowd. Her voice was clear, smooth, laced with a kind of calm that didn't dull her fury, but refined it into something more dangerous: truth. "Let's be clear about what just happened," she began. "A decorated officer, with over 2 decades of service, was treated like a criminal on the side of the road. Not because of anything she did, but because she didn't look like the image this officer associates with belonging." The crowd was silent. Phones are still up, but now no one was whispering. They were listening. "Your job," she continued, locking eyes with Finnerty, "is to serve, not to prejudge, not to intimidate, and certainly not to humiliate the very people your badge claims to protect." Finnerty's jaw clenched. But he didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Brooks stepped forward again. Her voice dropped lower, but somehow gained force. "This will be reviewed at the highest level," she said. "You've violated multiple federal procedures regarding the treatment of active duty personnel. You've ignored clear identification, and you escalated a peaceful interaction into a potential international incident because you made an assumption." She paused. "Assumptions," she said, turning to face the crowd, "have no place behind a badge." Finnerty swallowed hard, his eyes flicking back to the growing line of vehicles along the roadside. He wasn't just being watched, he was being recorded for history. A few more military vehicles had begun to arrive, quietly lining the shoulder. No sirens. No spectacle. Just a silent show of power and unity. The system he had tried to assert control over had just arrived in formation. Monica took a step closer to him now, her boots steady against the scorched pavement. She looked at him, not with vengeance, but with the clarity of someone who knew she had outlived worse. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resist. I followed every order," she said. "And still, you saw a problem that needed to be contained. Not a citizen who deserved respect, not a general who earned her place, just a body in a car that made you uncomfortable." His lips parted. "But nothing came. You didn't see a uniform," she added. "You saw a threat. You didn't see the stars on my collar. You saw the color of my skin." The statement hung in the air like a gavel slamming down. Brooks stepped in. "Officer Finnerty, until further notice, you are suspended pending federal investigation. Your weapon, badge, and radio, now." His face flushed. He hesitated. "I said now." Reluctantly, Finnerty unclipped the items from his belt, placing them in the waiting hands of a sheriff's deputy who had just arrived. The crowd behind them didn't cheer. This wasn't a victory lap. It was a reckoning. Monica turned away, not with anger, but with purpose. Her wrist still ached, and red marks ringed her skin like shadows of the cuffs that had once bound them. But she stood taller than she had all day. Colonel Brooks walked beside her. Santiago flanked the other side. Someone in the crowd whispered, "That's what power really looks like." And for the first time in what felt like hours, Monica allowed herself to exhale. Not just relief, but resolve. Because this wasn't over. This was the beginning. Fan 6. The conference room felt like a cell. Too bright. Too quiet. Too sterile. Every surface was white or gray, like someone had drained the place of warmth on purpose. Even the air was dry, institutional air that didn't belong to people, only procedures. Officer Jacob Finnerty sat alone at the long metal table, elbows tight to his ribs, hands clasped in front of him like he was trying to stop them from shaking. His uniform, still creased from earlier that day, now looked like a costume. The badge on his chest didn't feel like protection anymore. It felt like a target. Across from him sat Deputy Director Roy Spence, Internal Affairs. 63. Black. Decades in the system and twice as many years, seeing how it failed people who looked like him. His face was carved from stillness. Wrinkles lined his brow, not from emotion, but from observation. A man who had watched too many officers defend the indefensible. He didn't touch the folder in front of him. Not yet, just sat, watching. It was the silence that made Finnerty sweat the most. Finally, Spence spoke in a low, patient, and scalpel-sharp voice. "Do you know who General Monica Gaines is?" Finnerty nodded. "I do now." Spence tilted his head. "But you didn't know when you put her face down on the hood of her own Jeep?" Finnerty exhaled, long and forced. She didn't say her full name at first. She just said active duty. You wouldn't believe how many people lie about that to get out of a ticket. I've had people claim they're Marines, senators, even Beyoncé's cousin. Spence didn't smile, didn't blink. "Just let the man keep digging. She gave me attitude," Finnerty added. "Wouldn't look me in the eye. Didn't say what her role was, it felt off." "Attitude," Spence repeated, more to himself than as a question. "And how did that manifest exactly?" Finnerty hesitated. "She didn't answer some of my questions right away." "Did she raise her voice?" "No." "Did she insult you?" "No." "Threaten you?" "No." Spence tapped one finger lightly against the table. "So you escalated because she answered too calmly." Finnerty shifted in his chair. "It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. She looked at me like I didn't matter. That was it. The truth slipped out, clumsy and naked." Spence nodded slowly. "And that's why you cuffed her, because a black woman in a uniform didn't look at you with fear." "No," Finnerty said too quickly. "I didn't even think about—" "But she is black," Spence cut in, calm, precise. "And you did do it." Finnerty's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The silence felt heavier now. Across the table, Spence opened the folder. Inside, a thick stack of screenshots, printed stills from the footage, body cam transcripts, dash cam logs, witness statements, and a list of national media outlets that had already picked up the story under the headline, "Three-star general handcuffed by local police without cause." He turned the folder so it faced Finnerty. "That woman is part of military history," he said, voice now like cold iron. 26 years of service. 3 tours. Diplomatic command overseas. She's testified in front of Congress. She's trained more soldiers than you'll ever meet in your lifetime. She's helped shape policies this country pretends to care about when the cameras are rolling. Spence leaned forward, fingers interlocked. "And now, your name will sit next to hers in every search result, every documentary, every college lecture on how not to police." You just became a case study in a historical scandal." Finnerty stared down at the pages, each image a moment he couldn't undo. Spence didn't gloat. He didn't need to. The moment was doing the work for him. "This department," he continued, "has spent the last decade trying to prove it's better than its past. We implemented reforms, held town halls, trained rookies harder than ever, and then you come along and remind everyone why they stopped trusting us in the first place." "I didn't do it because she was black," Finnerty said finally, quietly. Spence met his eyes for the first time. "That's not up to you to decide," he said. "You don't get to define how people experience your actions. The moment you put your hand on that holster and assumed she was lying, the moment you ignored the stars on her shoulder, you told her, and everyone watching, that power still sees skin first." Finnerty slumped slightly. His shoulders sagged. Spence closed the folder. "There's an inquiry underway," he said. "You'll be on administrative leave starting today. Internal and federal review. Your actions will be reviewed by civilian oversight, military liaison, and DOJ personnel. You'll be represented. But understand something." Spence stood. "This isn't just a mistake. This is a moment. And once the public decides what you represent, there's no badge in the world that can protect you from that." He walked to the door and paused. "You wanted respect. What you demanded was submission. Now you'll learn the difference." The door closed behind him. And Officer Jacob Finnerty sat alone in the quiet, surrounded by the weight of everything he didn't see, until it was too late. The brownstone in southeast D.C. was tucked into a quiet block where history lingered in the bricks and the sidewalks hummed with generational memory. It was not a mansion, not a fortress, but for Lieutenant General Monica R. Gaines, it was the only place left that still felt like home. She sat on the couch, boots off, her shoulders relaxed, but her spine still straight. The late sun cast golden lines across the wood floor, slicing through silence. Her uniform hung in a garment bag by the door. She wore black slacks, a gray t-shirt, and her father's old dog tags around her neck, cool against her collarbone. Her wrists were still red. Across from her, sitting with a legal pad and a glass of scotch, was Marcus Gaines, her older brother, a former civil rights attorney turned non-profit strategist. He'd once shut down a for-profit prison contract with one letter and a rally. His suit was navy. His soul was wired for resistance. He studied her like he used to study hostile witnesses in court, patiently but precisely. "They want a statement," he said without looking up. Monica didn't answer. Her phone rested beside her, screen dark. Messages had been pouring in for 2 days. Calls from the Pentagon, the Department of Justice, journalists, military contacts from Kabul to Capitol Hill. Her name was now everywhere, but it wasn't her name she was thinking about. "They want a press conference," Marcus continued, voice even. "The White House is asking if you'll meet with the president. The View was called 3 times. So did CNN, PBS, and a documentary crew from London." "I didn't ask for any of this," she said. "No," Marcus replied. "You didn't." He set down the glass. "But that doesn't mean you can walk away from it either." She looked up. "You think I owe them something? I think the people watching that the ones who saw you bent over the hood of your own Jeep, handcuffed like a criminal, even with 3 stars on your collar, they think you're fighting for them now." She let the silence sit for a while. Then she said quietly, "I don't want to be a symbol." Marcus leaned forward. His eyes softened, but his voice didn't. "You don't get to choose that. Not anymore. You're not a civilian. You're not anonymous. And you damn sure don't blend in." The moment that camera went live and someone whispered your name, you became more than a person. "I didn't ask for it," she repeated. He nodded. "You didn't choose the spotlight. But the spotlight chose you, and now you get to decide what kind of shadow it casts." Monica exhaled slowly, leaning back. "I've seen what happens to people who become symbols. They get flattened, turned into slogans, used, then forgotten." Marcus tilted his head. True, but some of them get remembered, not for the moment, but for how they handled it. She looked toward the window. Outside, a group of teenagers stood on the corner. One of them held a sign made from cardboard and duct tape. The handwriting was messy, but the message was clear. She fought for the country. Who's fighting for her? Marcus saw it too. They're not protesting for a general. They're showing up for a black woman who stood still and didn't flinch when a gun was half drawn and the badge came with bias. Monica looked down at her hands that had carried wounded soldiers across foreign soil, hands that had signed deployment orders, written condolence letters, and held flags at graves. Hands that had never been cuffed, until now. "Do you remember what Dad used to say?" Marcus asked. Monica smiled faintly. "Which time? The one about dignity?" She nodded. "Dignity isn't about how they treat you. It's about how you carry yourself while they treat you like nothing." Marcus leaned back, folding his arms. "Well, you carried it. Now the question is, what are you going to do with it?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood and walked to the bookshelf where a photograph of their father sat between two bronze stars. Vietnam era. In the photo, he was 24, holding a folded flag, and wearing a uniform the country barely respected when he came home. "He never got a press conference," she said. "No," Marcus said, "but he got you. And now maybe you get to speak for both of you." A long silence passed. Monica finally picked up her phone and opened her messages. She scrolled past the press inquiries, past the angry emails from fringe groups, past the requests from news anchors and veterans organizations. She stopped at a message from the Department of Defense. Press availability approved. "National address window open. Draft a statement. We'll back you." She locked the screen and turned to Marcus. "If I do this, it's not about revenge." He raised an eyebrow. "Good, because revenge burns fast, responsibility lasts longer." She nodded slowly. "Then we go public. You want to go live or record a statement?" Monica didn't hesitate. "Live. No edits, no filters. I want them to hear it exactly as it happened. And I want them to hear it from me." Marcus smiled, proud but not surprised. He reached for his legal pad. "Then let's start writing." As Monica sat back down beside him, the weight of what was coming settled around her like body armor. But she welcomed it, because this time she wasn't entering a battlefield in foreign lands. This time she was stepping onto the soil that had tried to bury her voice, and she was going to make it listen. At exactly 2:00 p.m. Eastern, the doors opened, no fanfare. No music, no entourage, just the sound of heels echoing across marble. Lieutenant General Monica R. Gaines stepped onto the stage at the Pentagon's South Briefing Room dressed in full uniform, dark green, pressed with precision, medals aligned over her heart, service stripes down her sleeve like silent battle scars. Her face was calm, composed, but her eyes burned with something undeniable. The room was packed. Every major news outlet had sent its top anchors. Flags lined the wall behind the podium. Cameras panned across a crowd that included senators, civil rights leaders, military brass, and everyday citizens who had come not just to hear her, but to witness her. There were no opening remarks, no one from the White House, no handlers. Just her. She stepped to the microphone, adjusted nothing. She didn't shuffle papers. She didn't clear her throat. She began. "My name is Lieutenant General Monica R. Gaines. I am a daughter. I am a soldier. I have served this country for 26 years. I've led troops into combat. I've carried wounded Americans across war zones. I've negotiated with foreign dignitaries, buried my fellow soldiers, and returned home from battlefields most of you have only seen on television." Her voice did not waver. It cut, clear, sharp, deliberate. "And last week I was pinned against the hood of my own vehicle on a highway in South Carolina. Not as a threat, not as a suspect, but as a black woman whose identity wasn't believed. not because it wasn't presented, but because it didn't fit a stereotype. The cameras didn't blink. Neither did the crowd. I did everything right. I spoke calmly. I followed orders. I presented my documentation. I did what we are taught to do when confronted by those in uniform with a weapon and the power to ruin your life. And still, I was treated like a criminal. Still, I was cuffed. Still, I was humiliated. She paused. Not long, just enough to let the silence deepen, just enough to let the truth settle. I've been asked if I want justice. No, I don't demand justice. I expect it. The room stiffened. The weight of that sentence was not rhetorical. It was a line in the sand. Not just for me, but for the millions of Americans who don't wear a uniform. Who doesn't have a camera rolling? Who are stopped, profiled, and degraded on roads, in stores, in neighborhoods where the only crime they've committed is existing in the wrong skin? The backdrop of the Pentagon now felt like more than symbolism. It felt like an indictment. It felt like judgment. I was lucky I had a rank. I had witnesses. I had people who knew my name. But luck should never be the shield between someone and injustice. Because if it takes 3 stars in a military helicopter to stop a bad stop, what does that say for everyone else? She stepped slightly forward. Eyes locked on the front row, her voice tightened, not in fear, but in truth. Let me say this clearly. I am not here to shame one man. I am here to expose a system where de-escalation is optional, where assumptions go unchecked, where dignity is conditional, where the badge is used as a mirror to reflect bias, not as a shield to protect the innocent. A murmur moved through the room. She let it pass. This country teaches us to salute the uniform, but too often it forgets to respect the person inside the uniform, especially when that person looks like me. She took a breath. Slower now, controlled. The video you all saw was a moment. But moments turn into movements, and movements become history. So let me say this to every officer watching, to every department head, to every elected official, and to every citizen. Respect is not a courtesy. It is not earned by silence or submission. It is a right, and when it is denied, it will be confronted. A few members of the press lowered their pens, not because they had no questions, but because there was nothing more to ask. She glanced once toward the cameras, toward the millions watching from screens across the country, and then she spoke her final words. I will continue to serve. Not because this country is perfect, but I believe it can be better, and because change doesn't come from comfort, it comes from confrontation. Thank you. No one clapped. No one dared, because what had just happened wasn't a performance. It wasn't politics. It was a reckoning, delivered in a uniform that had bled for the country, and now stood toe-to-toe with it, demanding that it live up to its promise. As she stepped down from the podium, her heels echoed again through the chamber, not as footsteps, but as footnotes in history, and outside, where crowds had gathered behind barricades, a chant began. Not loud, not angry, just steady. General Gaines. General Gaines. General Gaines. The envelope was hand-delivered. Inside, there were no pleasantries, no warnings, no chance for negotiation. Just 10 printed words that struck harder than any reprimand ever could. Effective immediately. Your employment is hereby terminated. Officer Jacob Finnerty sat alone in his one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Kingsford County, the TV playing muted footage of the very press conference he'd tried to pretend hadn't happened. General Monica Gaines's face filled the screen. Her voice, even in silence, looked steadier than his entire career had ever felt. He'd thought about apologizing, drafted something once, deleted it before he finished the second sentence. What was he supposed to say? I didn't know who you were? I didn't mean for it to go that far? The truth was simpler and far more damning. He hadn't seen her, not as a general, not as a leader, not even as a citizen. He had only seen what he feared, and now the whole country saw him for what he had become, a man who abused power in broad daylight, thinking no one would notice. At the Pentagon, a different kind of paper moved across desks. The Department of Defense, in cooperation with the Department of Justice and the National Association of Police Chiefs, issued a formal mandate, the Gaines Protocols. It was the first sweeping civilian law enforcement directive directly influenced by an active-duty military officer since World War II. 3 primary statutes. 1. Mandatory identity verification of any person claiming active duty or veteran status prior to physical detainment. 2. De-escalation training updated to include implicit bias modules related to race, gender, and service. 3. Federal funding compliance is tied to the adoption of these procedures by local departments nationwide. It didn't fix everything. Monica knew that. So did the families who had already buried names that never made it into viral videos. But it was something. A start. A ripple. And ripples, when given time, become waves. 2 days after her Pentagon address, General Gaines stood in a very different kind of arena. A sun-warmed classroom in southeast D.C., windows cracked open, the sounds of traffic and playground noise mixing with the low hum of curious teenage voices. The invitation hadn't come from a senator, a network, or a government liaison. It had come from Mrs. Etz. Carmichael, a 9th grade civics teacher with 32 students, 3 working projectors, and a chalkboard that still creaked when used. "Class," Ms. Carmichael said, "please welcome General Monica Gaines." Some clapped. Some just stared. A few shifted in their seats like they were trying to decide whether to believe this was real. Monica didn't stand behind a podium. She pulled a chair into the center of the room and sat. "Ask me anything," she said. "There's no script today." A moment passed. Then from the back, a boy with cornrows and a skeptical glare raised his hand. "Why didn't you scream?" he asked. "When he grabbed you?" "When did he cuff you? If that was me, I would have flipped out." The room froze. Everyone looked at her. Monica leaned forward, elbows on her knees, eyes locking with the boy's. "Because calmness," she said softly, "is also a kind of strength." He blinked. She continued. "People like us, black people, brown people, we've learned that the world watches us differently. Our fear gets labeled as aggression. Our pain gets called resistance. Sometimes our voice alone is seen as a threat." She paused, not for effect, for honesty. "I've screamed before, in training, in combat. At the funerals of friends who didn't come home. But that day on the highway, I didn't scream because I knew it wouldn't protect me. Silence wouldn't either. What protected me was control, the control I fought hard to earn." A girl near the front raised her hand. "So you were scared?" Monica nodded. "Of course, but fear doesn't get to drive the car. You can feel it in the back seat, just don't let it take the wheel." The room was quiet now, not because they were unsure, but because they were listening. Then softly a student asked, "Do you think it'll happen again?" "To you? To someone else like you?" Monica's answer came without hesitation. "Yes." "I know it will. This wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last, but that's why we talk about it. That's why we show up. That's why you," she pointed gently around the room, "need to know what power you carry, even when they tell you you don't have any." A quiet buzz of awareness moved through the students. A few straightened in their chairs. 1 or 2 nodded slowly. A ripple. The start of something. Outside the classroom, news vans still lined the streets. Protesters had turned into advocates. Reporters were now quoting Monica's speech in editorials titled "The Face of Reform" and "The General Who Stayed Still." But inside that classroom, something deeper was taking shape. She hadn't come to make headlines. She had come to pass on a strategy for survival. Because for Monica R. Gaines, this fight wasn't just about consequences, it was about consciousness. And every student she spoke to, every hand that rose to ask her a question, that was where real change began, not in the marble halls of power, but in rooms like this, with kids who asked, "Why didn't you scream?" and women who answered, "Because I've learned how to make silence scream for me." The apartment was silent when Lieutenant General Monica R. Gaines stepped inside. The late-day sun filtered through sheer curtains, casting long, golden shadows across polished wood floors and worn bookshelves lined with military citations, framed photos, and campaign ribbons. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. For the first time in days, it felt like something other than waiting. She slipped off her jacket and set her phone on the table. Her eyes were drawn, inevitably, to the mantel. There, beside a folded American flag in a triangular case, stood a black and white photo in a brass frame, a younger man, hard-lined face, weathered eyes, Staff Sergeant William Gaines, U.S. Marine Corps, Vietnam. Her father. He had returned from that war only to be met with slurs instead of salutes, suspicion instead of thanks. He had fought in the jungle only to be followed in his own neighborhood called Boy by men with high school diplomas and badges. He never made it past E6, not because he wasn't qualified, but because promotions weren't handed out to soldiers who spoke too loud with skin too dark. Still, he wore his uniform every Veterans Day. Still, he saluted the flag even when the country forgot to salute back. And now, his daughter had worn 3 stars on her shoulders and cuffs on her wrists in the land he'd died defending. Monica reached for the photo. Her fingers grazed the cool glass. "I carried your fight farther than you ever got to," she whispered. "But we're still not done." The phone buzzed on the table. She turned, already knowing who it was, Marcus. She answered on the first ring. "You did it," he said. She exhaled. "Not yet." A pause, then quieter. "But I'll continue." He didn't press. He knew her too well for that. This wasn't a finish line, it was just a checkpoint. "You saw the news?" he asked. "They're calling it reform. They're calling it history," he said. Monica didn't answer. Her eyes drifted toward the open balcony doors where the soft wind carried the faint murmur of a city still on edge, but no longer asleep. The media vans had left, the protests had quieted, but the movement hadn't stopped. It had just changed shape, moved inside buildings, behind closed doors, into legislation and classrooms. "Dad would have been proud," Marcus said. Monica nodded. "He would have reminded me that pride is a privilege we still have to earn." They sat in silence for a moment, connected by breath and blood and burden. "You coming to the Hill next week?" Marcus asked. "Maybe," she said. "But not to testify. I want to listen. See if anyone's really hearing what we've been shouting for decades." He chuckled softly. "Only you could make listening sound like a threat." "I've had practice." They shared a quiet laugh. 2 siblings raised by a man who taught them not just how to survive, but how to stand. "I'll let you rest," Marcus said. "You deserve it." "Rest comes later," she replied. "Right now, I just need to think." She hung up and crossed the room. Outside, the Washington, D.C. skyline stretched beneath a bruised sky. The sun had dipped low, leaving streaks of amber and violet across the marble monuments and government buildings. Lights flickered on in offices where decisions were made, some that built justice, others that buried it. She stepped onto the balcony. Below, the city moved quietly, steadily. No protests tonight, no helicopters, no spotlights. Just the rhythm of traffic and the pulse of possibility. She rested her arms on the railing. This time, the fight hadn't taken place on foreign soil. It hadn't been waged with weapons or across enemy lines. It had happened right here, in the heart of the nation she'd sworn to protect. And this time, the country had listened. Not quickly, not perfectly, but it had turned its head. And now, it had to learn how to look. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass door behind her. A soldier. A daughter, a survivor, not just of combat zones, but of bias, silence, dismissal, humiliation. She had stood in its face, not with fists, not with fury, but with the weapon of discipline and the power of restraint, because in a world eager to provoke, she had chosen poise as protest. She looked up. The stars had begun to show in the sky, quiet reminders that light still breaks through darkness, even slowly. And somewhere below, in a classroom, or on a street corner, or in the mind of a young girl watching the news, someone else had just learned what dignity looked like in uniform. Not just because of who Monica Gaines was, but because she refused to let them forget who they had tried to make her become. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stood still, strong. Silent, seen. And this time the country looked back and finally saw her. If this story moved you, it should. Because what happened to General Monica Gaines isn't just a headline, it's a mirror. And the question is, do we dare look? Too many voices still go unheard. Too many names still go unspoken. Monica had a rank. She had visibility. She had the camera. But what happens to the ones who don't? Speak their names, share their stories, demand better. That's how change begins, not in silence, but in refusal. Subscribe to Injustice Unmasked for real stories that expose the systems, elevate the truth, and challenge the power structures that silence too many for too long. We don't just tell stories. We unmask what others want buried, because injustice doesn't end when the camera stops rolling. It ends when we stop accepting it. This is Injustice Unmasked, and we'll be back, because the next story might already be happening.